Efair arrived at the kitchen, and Tayo's mother handed her a bag of food items to prepare a pot of soup for them to eat. Soup? Efair shone her eyes in shock as she looked at the bag on the counter. I have never cooked before. What should I do? She asked herself as she panicked and began to empty the bag on the kitchen counter. Going through the ingredients, Efair wondered what she was going to do with them. She could not believe that Tayo's mother was making her cook on her first visit to her house. Is this a test to know if I'm good enough for her son? She thought to herself as sweat began to pour down her face like a fountain. It cannot be that bad, Efair said to herself as she threw all the ingredients into the pot, including whole peppers and onions, and filled the pot with water. She then brought the pot to a boil as she hoped and prayed for the soup to come out right. She tried calling Tayo, but his line seemed not to connect. Efair paced from one end of the kitchen to the other as she tried to figure out the way out of the house to run. She pushed on the kitchen door, leading outside the house, but noticed that it was locked. She tried going out through the kitchen window, but it was too small for her to fit. Stuck in the kitchen, Efair watched as the pot came to a boil. After a few minutes, Tayo's mother came into the kitchen to check up on the food. She opened the pot and screamed out in terror. What is this? She asked Efair, who told her that it was her own special way of preparing the soup. Leave my kitchen this minute, she screamed at Efair, who not only ran out of the kitchen but left the house entirely for her life. A few minutes later, Tayo returned to his mother's house and met his mother fuming in anger. Is everything okay, mother? He asked as his mother took him to the kitchen to show him the pot of soup that Efair made for them to eat. Tayo burst out in laughter as he saw all the ingredients floating in the pot, including whole peppers and onions, which were not even chopped or blended. Mama, why will you tell her to cook for you? He asked his mother, who said that she only wanted to see how good Efair was in the kitchen. Now you have seen it, Mama. I hope you are happy, Tayo said as he continued to laugh hysterically. Is it that her mother never bothered to teach her how to cook? She asked Tayo, who revealed to her that Efair was an orphan who never got to meet her parents. You can't marry her, Tayo's mother said with finality as she crossed her arms. Tayo, hearing the seriousness in his mother's voice, stopped laughing and looked at her. Mama, cooking skills don't define a person's worth or their capacity to be a good partner. Efair is a wonderful woman, and I love her for who she is, and not for her cooking, Tayo replied his mother, who said that her decision was not based on Efair's inability to cook, but on the fact that she was an orphan who didn't know her roots. How can you even think of marrying an orphan who was possibly abandoned by her own mother and father? Do you know why they abandoned her, or the situation surrounding her birth and family? Why would you take in an abandoned property as a wife? She asked Tayo, who could not believe how insensitive his mother was towards Efair. Mother, why would you victimize a victim for a situation they had no control over? He asked his mother, who told him that she did not care and that all she cared about was the fact that her son would never marry an abandoned orphan. Tayo, you can't marry her, and that is final, she said as she left his presence in anger. Tayo stood there confused as he had never seen his mother so serious in her entire life. He got into his car angrily and drove to Efair's house. When he arrived, he met Efair in the pool of her own tears. She felt so ashamed of herself and did not know what to do. I made a fool out of myself, Efair said to Tayo, who hugged her and assured her that everything would be fine. How will I ever face your mother again? She asked Tayo, who told her not to worry about his mother because he was the one interested in marrying her and not his mother. Efair was comforted by Tayo's words as she apologized for ruining their day. Oh no, you didn't ruin anything. It is better they found out this way so that they know that I am marrying you for who you are and not for what you can do. Efair's heart was glad as she thanked Tayo for loving her despite all her flaws. The next day, Tayo sat with his friend in the bar as they discussed all that happened in his mother's house the previous day. Tayo sought his friend's advice as he did not know how to go about his mother's demands. Tayo's friend Kunle took a sip of his drink and thought for a moment before speaking. Tayo, you know your mother loves you and wants the best for you, Kunle said, but sometimes parents can be too focused on traditions and status. Ife is a good woman and it's clear you love her. You need to make your stand clear to your mother, but also be respectful. I know, Kunle, Tayo replied. It's just hard to see her so upset and to hear the horrible things she said about Ife. I never expected her to be so against our relationship because Ife is an orphan. Kunle leaned in, offering a piece of advice. Maybe you should try talking to your mother again calmly. Explain to her why Ife means so much to you and how her status as an orphan doesn't define her character. If your mother sees how serious you are about Ife, she might come around, but be prepared that it might take time. Encouraged by Kunle's words, Tayo decided to give it another shot. The following day, he went to his mother's house, determined to have a heart-to-heart conversation with her. Mama, Tayo began. I understand your concerns, Mama, and I respect your opinions. But Ife is a part of my life now, and I love her deeply. Being an orphan doesn't change the fact that she's a kind, caring, and intelligent person. She faced so many challenges in life, but that only makes her stronger. I need you to see her for who she is, not where she comes from, Tayo said to his mother, who insisted that she had a bad feeling about Ife. Something is just not right, she said to Tayo as she explained that her intuitions are never wrong. You are my only son, and I will not let you go into anything blindly without knowing what you are getting yourself into. There is something off about that girl that I cannot place my finger on. Why don't you just find another girl and marry? She's not the only girl around, Tayo's mother said to Tayo, who told her that he was deeply in love with Efair and was not willing to marry another. He pleaded with his mother to see reasons with him, and his mother, although tempted to accept his decision, found herself troubled. No, I will not let it happen, she said sternly, as she warned Tayo to stay away from Efair. Tayo, fuming in anger, threatened his mother, saying that either she allows him to marry Efair or she loses him forever. What do you mean by that, Tayo? His mother asked, as Tayo told his mother that she should either allow him marry Efair or prepare for his funeral. Tayo then walked out on his mother, who sat in her chair confused. What should I do now? She thought to herself. Tayo was her only son, and she could not stand anything happening to him. So, she decided to pay Efair a visit to warn her to stay away from her son. The next evening, she arrived at Efair's house, and Efair was so shocked to see Tayo's mother in her house. Good evening, Mama, Efair said as she welcomed her into her home. I'm not here to beat about the bush. I'm here to tell you to leave my son alone. Tayo is my only son, and if you really love him and want the best for him, then you will leave him and find another man to love. There are thousands of men out there. Find another man to love you and leave my son alone, Tayo's mother said to Efair, who could not hold back her tears. Mama, why do you hate me so much? What have I done? Efair asked as tears poured from her eyes. Tayo's mother told Efair that all she was doing was protecting her son from an unknown fate. She told Efair to leave her son alone as she walked out of her house and headed home. Efair fell to the ground broken. She could not understand why her life had to be so complicated. All her life, she had yearned for love, but when love finally comes, something happens to deprive her of the love. Efair sat there sad and deep in her own thoughts that she didn't even notice when Tayo walked into her house. Efair, is everything alright? Tayo asked as Efair jerked back to reality. I am fine. I was just thinking about all that had been happening. Tayo interrupted Efair as he knelt down to the ground and asked her to be his wife. Efair could not hold back her excitement. However, Tayo's mother's warning continued to echo in her mind as she pondered on what to do. Yes, I will marry you, Efair said, throwing all cautions to the wind. The news of their engagement got to Tayo's mother, who called her son and warned him to break off the engagement. What do you have against a poor orphan? Tayo questioned his mother, who who tried to convince him to change his mind. However, Tayo's mind was already made up, as he told his mother to her face that she should either learn to accept Efair as her daughter-in-law or stay away from him forever. His mother, looking him in his eyes, said that the marriage would only happen over her dead body. She walked out on Tayo, who could not understand why his mother was proving so difficult. The wedding preparations began, and Tayo's mother stayed away and made no contributions. This broke Tayo's heart to see his mother act with such wickedness. His friend Kunle advised him to put the wedding on hold, as he could not go on with his wedding without his mother's blessings, but Tayo was not willing to back down now. He had to prove to Efair that his love for her was genuine, and backing down would send the wrong message to her. Tayo did everything within his power to make his mother see reason with him, but his mother stood her ground and was unwilling to change her mind. So, he returned to his house sad, hoping that his mother comes around before the wedding. The night before their wedding, Tayo went to bed and woke up screaming at the top of his voice. His friend Kunle, who was asleep in the next room, rushed to check what was happening and found Tayo unconscious on the floor. He quickly rushed Tayo to a nearby hospital, but Tayo remained unresponsive. The doctors carried out extensive tests on him but found nothing wrong with him. He seems fine, they told Kunle, who contacted his mother and his wife to be Efair, who was so alarmed to hear about Tayo's condition. She rushed as fast as she could to the hospital and was confronted by the sight of Tayo, who was laying on the bed in the hospital unconscious. "Doctor, what is wrong with him? We have checked extensively, but nothing seems to be the problem. His vitals are in perfect condition, and we can't seem to figure out why he has refused to wake up." Efair stood there confused as she asked Kunle what happened. "I was fast asleep when I heard a loud scream coming from his room. So I rushed in immediately to check on him and found him slumped on the floor. I rushed him to the hospital immediately, then called you and his mother." "Where is Mama?" "She's yet to arrive. I spoke to her earlier and told her all that happened." "What did she say?" "She just hung up the call. I'm assuming that she's on her way." They all stood there waiting and hoping for Tayo to wake up. Efair could not believe that they were in the hospital on the day that was supposed to be their wedding day. His mother was still yet to arrive, and no one knew where she was or why she had not yet shown up in the hospital. A few hours later, Kunle received a call from Tayo's mother, who told him to bring Tayo to a certain location. They immediately rushed him to the location to meet with his mother, who led them into the abandoned house. They met a man who sat in the middle of the room, humming a weird song. They laid Tayo before the man and watched as he performed some rituals to ascertain the cause of Tayo's strange condition. Just as they stood there silent, Tayo began to shake vigorously. His mother rushed to his side and pleaded for the healer to save her son, but the healer warned her to keep her distance. They all stood there and watched as Tayo struggled to breathe in air and stopped. The man looked up at them and pointed his finger at Efair, asking what she had done. Kunle could not believe his eyes as they all looked at Efair, who began to shake in fear. "Confess," the man screamed at Efair, who began to stutter as she spoke. "So many years ago, I dabbled into something that I believe has been haunting me. It was back in my village when I was so young and naive. I fell in love with a young man who promised to marry me. He was so handsome and all the girls in the village wanted him for themselves. One day, I was returning home from my father's farm when I caught him talking to another girl in the village who I knew was in love with him. This angered me greatly because I had warned him severally to stay away from that certain girl. When I confronted him later, he told me that he was returning home when she stopped to ask for his help. I was so insecure and asked him to prove to me that he was mine and mine alone. He asked me what he could do to prove this to me, and I told him to follow me. We walked into the village forest to a secluded path that people feared to tread. We arrived at an abandoned shrine, and I told him to take an oath with me, promising never to leave me for another. I was so in love with him, so I was sure that I would never leave him. He asked if this was what I wanted, and I said yes. So we took a blood oath in front of the abandoned shrine, promising each other a lifetime of love, saying that anyone who goes against the oath will suffer severe consequences. I felt secure after that, believing that nothing could ever come between us. However, this was not the case, as something I never anticipated happened. This was a year later. My boyfriend was involved in a fatal accident that left him blind and paralyzed. Our lives changed drastically as my boyfriend became so agitated and demanding. I could not bear the burden of caring for him for the rest of my life, especially knowing the life we had dreamed of together was now impossible. I felt trapped and desperate and thought of a way out. So one morning, overwhelmed by the weight of my circumstances and my desire to escape, I made a drastic decision. I staged my own death, leaving behind some of my clothes, smeared with the blood of a goat, to make it seem as though I had been killed by a ravenous beast. I knew that it would be difficult for my boyfriend to set me free from the oath at that point in his life, so I did what I felt was best for me at the time to secure my freedom as I fled to the city and never returned. Once I got to the city, I changed my name from Bolu to Efair and adopted the orphan story to make it easy for me to settle down with a man without having to explain my past to him. The first man I met, who declared an interest in marrying me, came to visit me one day in my house and began to scream hysterically, pointing at my face in terror. He called me a monster and took to his heels. That was the last time I ever saw him. The second man proposed to me but also left mysteriously as he accused me of trying to kill him in his sleep at night. These strange things have been happening, and I never wanted to believe that it had anything to do with the oath I took with my boyfriend so many years ago. But seeing Tayo in this condition, I am convinced that the spirit of the shrine is behind this strange condition. The healer spoke up saying that the spirits of the shrine are angered by the broken oath and wanted a life as compensation. Ife was so terrified to hear this. She asked the healer what she could do, and the healer revealed to her that they had to travel to her village with Tayo to the shrine where everything began. He ordered that they should prepare an animal for sacrifice to see if the spirits would be willing to accept an animal in exchange for the human life. Ife could not believe what her selfish actions had caused. She dreaded her return as she never knew how the villagers would react, knowing that she faked her own death. Even her family, that had mourned her for years, her mother and sister, what would they think of me? She thought to herself, as so many emotions ran through her mind. The worst of them all was Deji, who she left at his lowest. After promising him a lifetime of love, Ife was so petrified. She looked at Tayo, the man that she was deeply in love with, lying unconscious because of her. His mother's eyes piercing through her very skin with so much anger and hatred for ruining her son's life, even when she begged her to leave her son alone. My greed and yearning for love clouded my judgment, and I threw all caution to the wind, hoping that my marriage to Tayo would be a success. How stupid I was to think that the spirits would let me find happiness elsewhere. Ife thought to herself as they arrived her village. Everywhere seemed so different as Ife led them to the forest to the shrine where everything began. Lo and behold, when they arrived at the shrine, Ife saw something that she never expected to see. Deji, the man she promised a life of eternity, sat in front of the shrine. He was no longer blind or crippled, and he stared at her with hatred in his eyes. "You have finally returned," he said to Ife, who stuttered as she asked him what he was doing in the shrine. "I am the chief priest of this great shrine," he said. "How is that possible?" Ife asked as Deji narrated the whole story to her. "Few weeks to my accident, I was approached by a certain man who told me that I was chosen to serve in the shrine. I laughed to his face. thinking that it was a joke, but the strange man warned me that if I refused to answer my calling, something terrible would happen to me. I called his bluff and continued to live my life as if nothing happened. A few days later, the same man approached me again saying that I had a few days to accept my calling or live a fate more terrible than death. I refused to believe that the shrine would choose a man like me to serve as its chief priest. After all, I was so young and had a whole life ahead of me. So I ignored the man and continued to live my life. Then came my accident, which rendered me blind and unable to walk. On the day when I received news of your death, the strange man came to me again saying that it was not too late for me to answer my calling, as the spirits would not stop trying until I was dead. He promised me that the spirits will heal me completely if I decide to come serve as their chief priest. Desperate to restore my sight and walk again, I agreed, and the man took me to the shrine and presented me before the spirits, who restored my sight and made it possible for me to walk again. They gave me so much power, which made it possible for me to know that you were still alive. I monitored your every move and chased all the men in your life away. How do you think that you would break our oath and live happily with another? He asked Efair, who began to plead for mercy. Efair, I love you so much and can forgive you easily. However, the spirits, who stood as a witness to the oath, have demanded a sacrifice from you for reneging on your promise. They have demanded a life sacrifice before they can set Tayo free. Efair pleaded for Deji's help, saying that they have brought a live goat to use as sacrifice and that Deji should help her plead with the spirits to accept the animal as sacrifice, and Deji revealed to her that the spirits were not willing to accept animal sacrifice. Efair was so terrified. She pleaded with Deji to figure out another way, as she could not let Tayo die, and Deji revealed to her that there was only one other way. He said that Tayo would only live again if Efair agreed to fulfill her promise under the oath to marry him and live with him as his wife forever. Efair, torn between seeing Tayo live again and honoring the oath she made with Deji, felt her world collapsing around her. She looked at Tayo, who was lying unconscious, and knew that she had to save his life. Deji asked what her choice would be, as the spirits demanded a balance and were not willing to accept anything less. Efair's mind raced as she struggled to find a solution. She felt a deep love for Tayo and couldn't bear the thought of losing him, but the idea of being bound to Deji, especially after everything that had happened between them, filled her with so much dread. She looked at Deji and saw the remnants of the man who she had once loved, now overshadowed by the responsibilities of a vengeful spirit. Efair looked down in confusion as tears poured down her eyes. She knew that if she chose to marry Deji, it would not be out of love, but out of a desperate need to save Tayo, and that realization filled her with so much sorrow. So Efair looked directly at Deji and apologized for all the pain that she had caused him and for breaking their oath. However, she revealed to him that she would not be able to marry him because her heart belonged to another. She said that she was willing to do any other thing to save Tayo, as marrying Deji would only bring more pain and suffering. Deji was so sad to hear this. He told Efair that if she was not willing to marry him, then Tayo had to die. Efair immediately knelt down before the shrine and pleaded with the spirits to spare Tayo's life. She begged the spirits to demand for any other thing in exchange for Tayo's life. Immediately she said this, a strong wind began to blow through the shrine. Deji revealed to her that the spirits had accepted to take something else in exchange. He revealed that the spirits were demanding all her memories with Tayo. What this means is that Efair would be purged of all the memories she had ever shared with Tayo, even up to the day that they met. It would be as if Tayo never existed, and Efair would live her life without ever remembering him. This was the spirit's price for sparing Tayo's life. Ife's heart sank at the thought of losing all the memories she had ever shared with Tayo. Their love, the moments they shared, and the dreams they built together would be erased from her mind forever. An expensive price that she was willing to pay to save the life of the man that she loved with all of her heart. Ife turned to Deji, her eyes filled with tears as she accepted to give up her memories of Tayo to ensure that he had a chance to live. Deji nodded and the ritual began. The air around the shrine grew colder as a strange mist filled the entire atmosphere. Ife began to feel a strange sensation as though a veil had been drawn over her mind. She could see the images of her time with Tayo fading and slipping away like sand through her fingers. The pain was immense, but she remained steadfast, knowing that this was her only choice. As the ritual concluded, the spirits accepted her sacrifice. The dark mist cleared and temperature around the shrine returned to normal. Efair, now devoid of the memories of her love for Tayo, stood up, feeling a strange emptiness within her. She looked at Tayo, who was slowly waking up, and felt nothing. No recognition, no emotion, just a blank slate. Tayo opened his eyes and looked around, confused but alive. "Where am I?" Tayo asked, his voice weak. "What happened?" he asked again, as his friend Kunle rushed to his side to explain all that had happened. Tayo's eyes glanced around as he searched for Efair. He smiled, but she looked at him with no recognition. "Efair, are you okay?" he asked, concerned. Efair looked at him blankly, then turned to Deji. "Who is this man?" she asked, her voice devoid of any emotion. The whole place fell silent, and Tayo's face fell as he realized what had happened. His heart broke to realize that Efair sacrificed all their memories together to save his life. He tried to reach out to her, trying to connect with her once again, but Efair stepped back, confused and uncomfortable with the stranger before her. Tayo's heart shattered into a million pieces to see the woman that he loved look at him like a stranger. All the memories they shared were gone in her mind, but still very fresh in his. "It is your love, Tayo," he said to Efair, who looked at him terrified. Tayo in this moment felt like ripping his mind out. All efforts to remind Efair of the times they shared failed, as Efair didn't seem interested in him. Tayo's mother, who had been watching everything, stepped forward and placed her hand on Efair's shoulder. "You have shown great courage and love," she said as tears poured down her eyes. "I was wrong about you, and I am truly sorry for everything," she said as Efair nodded her head, still confused and disconnected from the emotions around her. With heavy hearts, Tayo and his mother left the shrine, knowing that their lives would never remain the same. Efair, now a stranger to them, watched as they said their final farewell. Tayo, finding it hard to accept his new reality, ran back to give Efair a hug, hoping that she remembers who he is. They stood there for minutes, wrapped in each other's arms, and Efair, despite not remembering anything about Tayo, felt some peace in his arms, a peace that calmed her troubled heart and brought tears to her eyes. "I will always love you, Efair, even if you can't remember me. I will never forget you, and I hope that someday you remember all the good times we shared and all that I was to you," Tayo said as he bid Efair farewell. Efair, feeling the sincerity in his voice, could not help but cry, although she didn't fully understand why. Deji watched the scene unfold with a heavy heart. He realized the depth of the bond between Efair and Tayo, and for a moment, he felt a pang of guilt for the role he played in their separation. He knew, however, that the spirit's demand was beyond his control, and he could only offer Efair the chance to live a new life, free from the burdens of the past. As Tayo and his mother left the shrine, they carried with them the pain of their loss. Tayo's mother, whose heart was once filled with hatred for Efair, now wished that Efair could return with them and marry her son. Efair, on the other hand, felt a strange emptiness within her. She did not understand the depth of what she had lost, but she knew that something was missing. Her dreams were filled with bits and pieces of strange memories and places which she found hard to remember. She returned to her family, who were glad to have her back. Tayo, however, returned home and struggled to live without Ife. He tried to move on, but everywhere he looked reminded him of her. The thought of Ife, living without any memory of their love, was a burden he carried with him daily. Yet, he decided to cherish their memories alone, holding on to the hope that Ife might one day remember and come back to him. The lesson to be learned from this story is that we should not make rash decisions, but think through the consequences of every decision we make. Nothing remains hidden forever, so we should try to be honest with those we hold dearly. Also, do not judge others based on their circumstances, but learn to be open and accept people for who they are. Finally, the story demonstrates that actions have consequences, and trying to escape or hide from the past can lead to greater problems. It serves as a reminder that it is better to face issues head on rather than avoiding them. I hope you enjoyed the story.